Welcome to Lessons for Full Spectrum Humans, Level 2. This is part 2 of the topic cancer. And in this part, we are going to talk about fighting the invaders. Now, I hesitate to use words like invaders and fight, and you know at this point in the class that when I talk about fighting, I am talking about fighting with love, with unconditional love. And the fight that we fight is that of a peaceful warrior. I mentioned a movie such as Independence Day, when humans feel motivated to defend their species and their planet from invaders. And the first thing is the idea of picking up a gun and shooting the other person. And I will tell you that that is not the type of fight I am advocating. I am not advocating for violence, negativity, or what I would consider the lower vibrational, denser emotions that merely are what cancer feeds off of, including anxiety. You fight cancer with joy. Wish I could make that a little bigger. There you go. You fight cancer with joy. And I mean a lot of joy. I have already said in part 1 that one of the entry points that cancer uses, like it makes a little break in your genetic code and says, now I can get in there, through feelings of low self-worth, negativity in the sense of not being good enough, not meriting, or feeling guilt. Guilt is a big one. Guilt is a heavy, dense emotion. And what guilt is really saying to the universe is, no thank you, I don't deserve life. That's what guilt is really saying. And in the previous recording, what I said was the example of, you didn't send a birthday card in 1983. When you hear past the year 2000, if you at this moment are spending any time thinking about anything that happened in 1983, you're wasting the present, and especially if you are thinking about events that tell you that you are not good enough. What that really means is that you don't get to be here now, you don't get to be in the now. Your joy of the now is diminished because you're busy thinking about a bad thing that happened in 1983. And that transfers over to anything. Traumatic events, life losses, or the accumulated emotional detritus of life. In fact, if I would say, if there's one thing that reduces longevity, it is the accumulated emotional detritus of life, or unprocessed emotions, unprocessed emotional baggage. I know that I spoke about in the part 1 of this recording, the Crab Nebula, and that there are these crab nebulans there, and their national pastime is hating. They love to beam hatred and negativity at other places and feel righteous in doing that, in the same way that a person who believes in traditional Christianity feels righteous by praying for someone's soul. You know, like if you see a quote-unquote a sinner, then you say, I will go to church and pray for your soul. These beings, the crab nebulans, feel as much religious righteousness at sending out hatred. And the thing that they cannot deal with is joy. So, for example, when I am in my studio, I often put on wonderful music, like I love John Coltrane, especially when there's nice sunlight coming in through my window onto my painting table, and I mix up some of my favorite colors, and I paint, and I'm literally in joy. I am literally not thinking about anything else. Bills, whatever, personal crises, people who don't like me or I don't like them, any of those stupid things do not take away from my joy. And cultivating that is one of the ways to fight and prevent cancer. Okay, so this is huge because in the 20th century, when cancer became more of an epidemic, people looked at it as a diagnosis was a death sentence. That when you found out you had cancer, literally you had to stop living your regular life. You had to take poisonous chemicals that would reduce your vitality, make you look bad, make you feel bad, and then most likely lead to your demise. This is all changing, I'm very happy to say. In the past 15 years or so, there has been a lot of positive movement in fighting cancer the way it actually should be fought. We fight with love. We fight with joy. So one of the answers to the question of why do some identical twins develop cancer and some do not, even if they have the exact same genetic code, and the answer is maybe one twin enjoyed their life a lot more. Now we're getting into all of these subtleties of the non-physical realm. This is aspects of life that medical science and observational materialists are not prepared to deal with, because although we can all recognize that emotions like joy or sadness are having an impact on our life, science is not prepared to measure your joy or your sadness and then apply that to the understanding of the origin of disease. I mentioned within the past 15 years or so, there has been a change in the mental program. In some ways, the mental program has ramped up because there's a lot more of those pink ribbons or red ribbons, to like run for the cure or whatever. There's a lot of those little signals everywhere, and those are like, when you are hypnotized, it is possible to implant triggers. And the media literally hypnotizes humans. For example, with the idea of Angelina Jolie, a well-known celebrity who preemptively had a double mastectomy in order to avoid developing cancer. First of all, according to the understanding that I have given you, you understand that that would not protect you from cancer. And also it must be understood, and we'll get into this with the lesson about sexuality, that literally the breasts are reservoirs of joy. They are reservoirs of love and nourishment and, yes, sexual pleasure and joy. And the idea of cutting off, voluntarily and preemptively cutting off one's reservoirs of joy is actually antithetical to the approach that I am espousing here and that I am suggesting to others. A much more effective approach, I feel, would have been for her to drink raw cannabis juice. So let's get into this now. Please forgive me this extremely crude drawing. And this plant literally is a miracle plant. It is meant to be here on the surface of the planet at this time for humans to use as a tool for bringing your chakras back into divine alignment and raising your energy vibration to the level that it's actually supposed to be at. It must also be understood that this cannabis has been used 5,000 years ago. Ancient China was called the land of hemp. Their entire economy and civilization and all food and medicine were based entirely on hemp, and hemp and cannabis are highly related as plants. I have also spoken about in previous recordings that the persecution of cannabis is associated with the third eye and the awakening of the third eye. And the third eye is the Christ chakra. The idea that the persecution of cannabis is directly analogous to the persecution of Christ consciousness. That ingesting this plant can awaken this chakra or energize this chakra. And so beings who don't want you to awaken or energize this chakra have made this plant illegal and have made it inaccessible or difficult to find, or placed huge restrictions or punishments upon people who use it. So now we've got a connection between cannabis and Christ consciousness and people who persecute cannabis and Antichrist consciousness. And I've been telling you all about the Crab Nebulans, who are not a very happy group of people over here. What we essentially have is a conflict between consciousnesses of divergent star origins. The Crab Nebulans come from one particular area, and they have their consciousness is at a particular stage of development. And then we have Christ consciousness. I won't say Christ consciousness lives in a particular area. It would be more accurate if I just made dots all over. Christ consciousness is all over. There are many Christed extraterrestrials, and humans certainly embody Christ consciousness. But what I'm saying is that when you look at the experience of humans fighting to have access to cannabis on the earth, what you're really talking about is a fight between crabnebulans who don't want people to be able to ingest this substance that essentially makes them unpalatable. This must be understood. When you ingest cannabis, these beings, these crabnebulans that want to eat you, it's like they want to take a bite out of you, but they can't. There is a direct connection between the emotional well-being that one, or even euphoria that one experiences from ingesting cannabis, and creating creating a shield between yourself and these negative thought entities that would like to feed off of you. Now, cannabis is a psychoactive plant. That means that when you ingest it in its heated form, it affects the workings of the brain. However, if I take this beautiful leaf and I juice it the same way that I could juice spinach and parsley and beets and everything like that, and pretty much, guys, that is my morning drink now that I have relocated to California. I am able to grow cannabis legally in my backyard. I grow organic, high CBD plants, and CBD is one of the anti-inflammatory chemicals that is very beneficial to ingest and is not psychoactive, even though I have no problem with psychoactivity. But the point is that this has become a part of my daily health regimen, and I recommend it to everyone because when cannabis contains a psychoactive chemical called THC, but when it is not heated, it is THCA. That means it's in the acidic format. So the THC cannot easily, let's draw a brain. All right, here's your brain. I know it's kind of convoluted. The THCA with that A cannot easily get into your brain because of this. The acidic part of it, there's an extra molecular chain that makes it unable to get into your brain. And when I'm saying this, please don't be too literal. This is your blood vessel, and here's cannabis in your blood vessel, and the cannabis stays in your blood vessel and is not able to actually get into your brain. That's called the blood-brain barrier. That's an important thing to maintain. But let's say you have a brain tumor. You want cannabis to be able to go to your brain. Then what you do is you heat the cannabis, and that is called decarboxylating it. You can either cook it or heat it or dry it out using a fan or just time. And when that happens, the THC then becomes available to go into the brain. So when you make raw juice like this, it is not psychoactive. It will not make you feel sleepy or tired or mentally incapacitated in any way. You can still drive a car, run a chainsaw, and take care of your children. And the THCA and all of the other plant chemicals help to fight and prevent cancer. So this is one of the first things. Cannabis and hemp have been made illegal in this time and place intentionally by corporations like Monsanto. And you say, but wait a minute, Aurora. Corporations like Monsanto don't make laws. Human lawmakers in Congress make laws. That's right, my friends. Human lawmakers in Congress make laws, and those human lawmakers are owned by and heavily influenced by all of these non-corporeal entities that are corporations. Corporations literally have an unlimited amount that they can contribute towards campaigns, towards political campaigns. So now we need to understand that everything in the country is really being legislated in favor of non-corporeal entities called corporations. The laws against cannabis, the laws allowing genetically modified organisms to be in the food supply and to be unlabeled. And genetically modified organisms are another reason why you cannot simply point the finger at someone who develops cancer and say, oh, your emotions did it, or oh, your spirit was out of alignment. No, you know something? If you eat a nonstop diet of genetically modified corn chips, it doesn't matter if you are a wonderful spiritual person living in joy. You're literally consuming a substance that is meant and intended to depopulate the planet by beings who either feel that there are too many humans in general, or that even one is too many humans, and who do not need to have a biosphere in order to live. The biosphere is the layer of living organic life on our planet. It's important to you and me because we're organic life. We're part of the biosphere. But let's say if you were a machine, or if you were a non-corporeal entity that was made of pure energy, you would not be a part of the biosphere, and you would care a lot less about whether the biosphere was horribly polluted. These non-corporeal corporate entities not only do not care if the biosphere is polluted, they would be happy to see an end to the biosphere. They see it as a contamination. They would be happy to see a sterile earth with no organic life. This is the aim of most of these companies. Let's get into Fukushima also. Fukushima is constantly pumping out radiation. If you are living on the surface of Earth, you are being exposed to it. Even if you live in Antarctica or especially in Alaska, I want to say the North Pole, you are being affected by it. A friend from New York recently asked me, well, do you think it's in the milk over here? And I said that as soon as Fukushima happened in 2011, tests were done on like dairy cattle as far east as Vermont. It was cesium-137 is the main pollutant that is coming out of Fukushima, and it is a radioactive element, and it causes cancer when you ingest it or when you're exposed to it, and it's in the air. It's in the water. All of the water that is picked up by the jet stream over the Pacific then comes over the center and eastern part of the United States. The overarching wisdom of why is Fukushima happening? Like, my God, why is God making this happen? The overarching wisdom is that we need to think globally. We cannot merely think, oh, that's just one little problem, over here on that far side away of the planet. And of course, I live over here, so I'm totally not bothered by that red X over there. Without understanding that your food, your air, your water, your consciousness, it's all intertwined. And we need to take care of the planet as a whole. So one of the main things is I highly recommend that everyone drink raw cannabis juice in order to mitigate the effects of the radiation that we are constantly being exposed to due to Fukushima. And Fukushima is a horrible accident and a slow motion ecological disaster. But at this point, it is being mismanaged, or the cleanup is being mismanaged to the point that I would call it evil or complicit with evil. Because just like, these beings over here are pumping out tons and tons of hatred, and that's very convenient, and that causes lots of cancer for them to eat off of. So here's Fukushima over here, pumping out lots and lots of radiation into Pacific seafood. So first of all, I caution all of you, please do not eat Pacific seafood. I don't care how delicious salmon is, or oysters, or any of the things that are available. Kelp, a lot of sushi. I mean, my goodness, I love sushi and Japanese food, and I avoid eating seaweed and things that have come out of the Pacific. And it's too bad that that is the truth of what's going on. But if you have any desire to live a long and healthful life and not develop cancer, I highly recommend that you do not eat Pacific seafood. I also recommend you get a water filter that filters out particulates like cesium-137. You may not know this, but Brita filters don't filter out radioactive particles, and they actually add aluminum to the water. Brita filters, kind of a scam. Filter your drinking water. Filter your pet's drinking water. Drink raw cannabis. Raw cannabis can be for anyone 5 years old to 100 years old. It's not going to negatively affect your consciousness or your capacity to think clearly. But now let's talk about cannabis oil. This is a medicine that is essentially a sap that is like what happens when you take all of the available plant medicine from the plant and concentrate it down. Then you end up with the substance that is known currently as cannabis oil. And that is how you really treat cancer. So if you've been living in joy and doing good things and everything like that, but you still develop cancer, first of all, it's not your fault. Remember, I've been telling you all about all of the pollutions that exist in this time and place, and it is very difficult, almost impossible, to avoid all of the environmental contaminants. I told you to avoid Pacific seafood and sushi and seaweed, but notice I didn't say things like, oh, never eat this, never eat that. Guess what, guys? It's because it's in everything. I'm sorry to inform you that, and I do not mean to be giving you a negative mental program. I'm giving you a positive mental program because there is a solution. And this has everything to do with the non-corporeal entities that own the lawmakers of Congress and that determine what is available as a medicine and control not only the pharmaceutical industry, but also the medical insurance industry. So now we understand. Just change a different color. These crab nebulins over here, they're in bed with Monsanto. They're in bed with Congress. They're in bed with your Aetna health insurance. They're in bed with, let's name a major pharmaceutical company. I don't know, GW Pharma. GW Pharma and all of these makers of chemicals are all working together to create cancer in the body, create the mental programming and mental emotions surrounding cancer in the body, and prevent people, humans, from having access to the very thing that can cure them. And the way that it cures is, let me just clear a little bit of space here. Let's say down here that this orange cell is not a healthy cell, right here. Orange cell is a mutated, unhealthy cell, and blue cell is a nice, lovely, healthy cell. When you ingest cannabis oil, this whole plant extract, cannabis, THC, and CBD surround healthy cells and protect them and say, you're a healthy cell, don't do anything bad to this guy. And it goes to unhealthy cells, looks at them, and says, you are not shaped like you're supposed to be. Let's make this kind of like a weirdly shaped cell. You're shaped like that. You're not shaped right. You need to self-destruct, and that's called apoptosis. Apoptosis is the word for dismantling a tumor, dismantling a cell, actually. I think of it almost like, a tent, like you've got a tent, and if you just take out the support structures, the tent just collapses in on itself. That is very similar to what happens in apoptosis. The cellular support structures are told to just dismantle themselves, and the cell collapses in on itself, and then a immune cell surrounds it and helps it to pass out of the body. This is literally the way that you make your body unpalatable to the crab nebulins. By ingesting cannabis and saturating all of the cells of the physical body with this substance, it means that essentially there are none of those little entry points that the cancer concept, the entity, energetically can reach in. And there's more, because cannabis itself causes uplifted feelings. It causes people who ingest it. So remember I said that this juice is not psychoactive. That means that it will not change your level of conscious awareness. You are still mentally sharp and mentally present. However, it does make you feel vital and energetic and good on a deep level. Well, cannabis oil that is psychoactive is very powerful in being able to change a person's mood. As an anecdote, a friend of mine back in Woodstock had late-stage breast cancer, and she managed to get some of this highly concentrated cannabis oil. And she came to me a few days after she had begun taking it, and she was still adjusting to its side effects, and she said, I just wanted to check with you to see if I'm doing things right because I think I might be taking too much. I'm feeling really good. And basically, she was smiling and happy and felt hope for the future. Whereas a few days before that, I had seen her lying on her couch, totally depressed, totally dark, with no energy and like unable to get up and do anything. The mental uplift is absolutely essential for the healing. Just as I said that the lower, denser, negative vibrations of guilt and sorrow and shame definitely contribute towards cancer, that makes those little openings in the genes for them to get in, and that joy is how we fight like peaceful warriors against this invader. Well, cannabis is like molecular joy. Not that I'm saying that when you eat cannabis oil, you will instantaneously feel like, oh, all of my life's problems have evaporated. Not at all. My friend who still had cancer, she still had to deal with that. She still had to deal with all the other things in her life. But her emotions felt peaceful and positive. She had the mental energy and perspective to get out of bed and begin to approach life and begin to do things. And for a person in late-stage cancer, that is huge. And her story is poignant. She recovered and lived for about 3 years, taking a maintenance dose of cannabis when she could, but it was difficult for her to find complete access to it. And eventually she did die of a stroke very suddenly. But cannabis oil allowed her to live well and have a good quality of life. And she got to be a mom and be active and not be, lying on a couch sacked out because she's taken all sorts of heavy drugs that take energy away from her. This is an anecdote, and there are many people having parallel experiences. Remember I told you about pharmaceutical, medical insurance, and lawmakers in Congress who are all in collusion with crab nebulans and evil beings that want to feed off of you. Well, all of those beings want to prevent research into cannabis oil and they still want to drag their feet and prevent people from being able to say, scientifically, we proved it in a double-blind test that this really happens and really works. So at this point, there are many anecdotes of people having disease improvement and abatement. However, there is not yet scientific research, and this is part of the challenge of being here in this time and place. Because when people begin to do scientific research into the causes of cancer and the effects of cannabis, it's going to cause another unfolding and another eye-opening and awakening about who we are and who we are in relation to cannabis and who we are in relation to cancer, the invader. So you are in this class and your consciousness can deal with those insights. Medical science and the traditional people who control the worldview of this time and place, the objective materialistic worldview, are not yet open to this story of reality, which is that basically Earth has been invaded and cancer is one of the evidences of that. Because think about that, if you really knew that and you were in a position of power and authority, you would then actually have to act. You would have to actually do something to prevent these substances and practices that cause cancer from being spread all around the environment on Earth. This is literally part of the battle or the struggle between duality, light and dark, good and evil. And I'll tell you that eventually the entire planet will be rendered unpalatable to the crabs of the Crab Nebula.